Thank you very
It's
much.
probably controlling the mouse.
Much of the information, most of
need
the
another.
information will very quickly show in this presentation is extensively described in the recent book, which you can see on this slide. I start with the electromagnetic spectrum. We all know every type of of modern digital wireless communication, EMF, always combine microwave carrier frequencies with extremely low frequency and ultra low frequency pulsation, modulation, and random variability. And this makes these wireless communication EMFs very complex. And this is one reason for their intense bioactivity. Moreover, all man-made electromagnetic fields are totally polarized and coherent. This is a polarized field, oscillates in a single direction, while a non-polarized field oscillates on every possible direction. These can induce forced oscillations of charged particles, while these cannot. Unique properties of polarized and coherent man-made EMFs are first, they can produce constructive interference and amplify their intensities at certain locations. Second, they force all charged particles, and especially mobile ions, which are of critical importance in living cells tissue, to oscillate in parallel and in phase with the fields. Polarization and coherence is the reason why radiation from a cell phone close to our head is damaging, while 100 times stronger radiation from the sun is vital. The second is non-polarized and non-coherent. This is the reason. Main sources of EMF pollution are the high voltage power lines, which emit continuous waves, fields, and wireless communication EMFs from devices and antennas, which are pulsing, not continuous wave fields. The carriers are always included within on-off pulses. These are typical pulsations from 2G mobile phone and antennas. These are the 217 Hertz pulses in 2G. These are 100 Hertz pulsations included in 3 and 4 and 5G. These are 10 Hertz pulsations included in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And this is a final signal from a base antenna, which is totally unpredictable, which is a mess and varies unpredictably because it includes all these various pulsations communicating with hundreds, thousands of users at the same time, with each user applying pulsation like this or like this. And so if we add all these pulsations, we get a very complicated signal which varies unpredictably each moment. And of course, no living organism can adapt to an unpredictably varying stressor. And this is a very important reason for the extreme bioactivity of the wireless communication signals. These are, we all know that, and many speakers told already before, that there is genotoxicity in wireless communication signals. They induce genetic damage, which is DNA damage, chromosome damage, etc., micronuclei, etc. These are microscope pictures from fruit fly ovarian cells. These are fruit fly ovarian cells exposed to cell phone radiation, 2G, and this is the control signal. We can see the characteristic fluorescence here that denotes DNA fragmentation. This is the picture from ovaries of fruit flies exposed for just a few minutes to cell phone radiation at close distance. These were the first experiments that showed DNA damage from real signals, from real mobile phone in Panagopoulos et al. 2007. Here are experiments with human peripheral blood lymphocytes exposed. This is the control picture. We see no aberrations. Exposed to mobile phone, 3-4G mobile phone, or a very high caffeine dose. And the effects when we combine the two stressors are the effects are synergistic. The aberrations when we combine the stressors usually exceed the sum of the aberrations from the separate stressors. And the same happens when we combine cell phone radiation with gamma radiation, like the pictures we see here. Again, the action is synergistic. When we combine the two stressors, we usually get more aberrations than the sum of aberrations from the separate stressors. We know that real life variable, extremely variable wireless communication EMFs are significantly more damaging than other types of man-made EMFs, including power line EMFs, and significantly more damaging than the simulated exposures from simulated wireless communication EMFs with fixed parameters. That was discussed yesterday, was noted by another presentation. If we look to studies that have used simulated signals, then about 50% of them, only 50% of them find effects. But if we look at studies that have used real-life exposures from cell phones and antennas, then more than 95% of them find effects. What this tells us, in my opinion, is that the variability, in addition to polarization and coherence and intensity of the field and the existence of ELFs and the duration of exposure and other parameters that we all know they are bioactive, in addition to all those parameters, the variability of the field is a very important bioactive factor. If we wanted to set relevant exposure limits for wireless communication fields that would allow the existence of the technology, because we don't want to stop the technology. Mobile phones are very useful. They can save lives, but we cannot put antennas anywhere and swim within a sea of microwaves. This is very dangerous. So if we want, we should put relevant exposure limits, and a relevant exposure limit that would allow the operation of the technology comes from experiments that show that for short-term exposures above 1 microwatt per square centimeter, we have DNA damage within minutes. Therefore, a relevant short-term exposure limit would be should be no more than divide this value by 10. So a relevant exposure limit for short-term exposures would be 0.1 microwatts per square centimeter. But if we want to get a relevant long-term exposure limit, we should divide this value by at least 100. And then we would get a relevant exposure limit for long-term exposures, hours and days and weeks and months and years, which should be no more than 1,000th of a microwatt per square centimeter. And this, as you can see, is 4 million times smaller than the current ICNIRP limit averaged over 6 minutes, which is 4,000 microwatts per square centimeter. The explanation now of the genotoxic action of polarized and coherent, in other words, man-made oscillating EMFs, The genetic damage, it is very well known today that is due to oxidative stress. And this is shown in those very good studies by Yakimenko et al. How this happens? Polarized and coherent varying EMFs cause irregular opening and closing of voltage-gated ion channels, VGICs, in cell membranes. VGIC dysfunction alters the ion concentrations within the cells. This disrupts the cell's homeostasis and the redox status of the cells. This causes overproduction, generation of reactive oxygen species, ROS, and oxidative stress within minutes in the cells. EHS, by the way, is also connected with chronic oxidative stress and inflammation. The initial ROS are converted into the most powerful hydroxyl free radical and peroxynitrite, which are finally those final ROS that damage DNA and other critical biomolecules. How this happens schematically, we can summarize this, that we have the EMF exposure. This causes VGIC dysfunction in the cells. This alters the intracellular ionic concentration of calcium, potassium, sodium, and other critical ions. This causes activation of enzymes in the cells, like the nitric oxide synthase, like the mitochondrial electron transport chain, like the sodium potassium ATPase, like the NADPH oxidase. These enzymes are activated by the perturbation of the ionic concentrations, and they generate ROS. The initial ROS are converted to the final ROS, which are peroxynitrite and hydroxyl radical, as I already said. And these are the final ROS, very powerful ones that go and damage any critical biomolecule, including DNA. How this happens at cellular level now. This is the cell with a membrane and a very strong electric field of the order of 10 to the 7th volts per meter around across every cell membrane. This is the membrane enlarged with the lipids and a VGIC. This is a VGIC, a schematic representation. It consists of 4 symmetrical units. You can see the 4 symmetrical units, and the pore of the channel is among those units. Here you can see a cross-section of the channel. It consists of the 4 symmetrical units, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one of those 4 units consisting of 6 parallel alpha helices, the 4th one of which in all units is positively charged. It is called S4, and it is positively charged due to lysine and arginine amino acids. The VGICs are the most abundant ion channels in all animal cell membranes. The VGICs open or close by electric forces on their voltage sensors on those fixed charges, exerted by membrane voltage changes usually, but they can be gated when an ion is oscillating in very close proximity within the channel. And this is the essence of the mechanism. Otherwise, if the channel should be gated by the external field, we would need huge fields of the order of the membrane fields, 10 to the 7th volts per meter, while we know from many experiments that we have effects from electric fields down to 10 to the -4 or -5 volts per meter. Here is the representation of the internal of the channel and an ion forced to oscillate by an external field. These are the fixed charges in the S4 helices. The ion, while oscillating, exerts Coulomb forces on the fixed charges because the distance is changing. So we have a displacement, dr, and this displacement of the ion is translated into electric forces, dF, on the fixed charges of the channel. And we can see that these forces are very strongly dependent on the inverse third power of the distance between the charges. This is why the channels are gated easily by oscillating ions, because the forces depend upon the inverse third power, and we have a very small distance of the order of less than a nanometer. Otherwise, we would need huge fields, as I said before, but we don't need now these huge fields. Once we have polarized fields forcing the ions to oscillate in very close proximity to the sensors of the channel, then we have dependency upon the inverse third power of the distance, and this makes the forces very strong. So we have forces exerted by the external field on the mobile ions within VGACs. The mobile ions are forced to oscillate in parallel and in phase with the oscillating field. The oscillating ions exert constructive forces on the S-force sensors of the VGACs. These forces are similar to those exerted by changes in the membrane potential able to physiologically open or close VGACs.
2 minutes.
And this causes irregular opening and closing, in other words, dysfunction of the VGACs. And this causes disruption of the cell electrochemical balance and ROS overproduction in the cells. If we put all the forces exerted on the mobile ion, this is the force from the field, this is a restoration force, this is a damping force, this is the total force, these are the standard forces from oscillation mechanics. And if we find the values of those parameters here, like omega μ, which is the cell frequency of the ion, the cell frequencies of all ions within cells are in the ultra low frequency range, 0.01 hertz about. If we also calculate the damping coefficient, which are calculated in the publications everybody can see, we can solve this differential equation and find a solution which gives us the displacement of the ion. R is the displacement of the ion from its initial position, and we can see that this displacement, which is proportional to the bioactivity of the field, actually, because the larger this displacement, the larger the force exerted on the voltage sensors, as we saw before. So the larger this displacement, the larger the bioactivity of the field. And this displacement depends upon the amplitude of the oscillation, of the forced oscillation. And we can see that the amplitude is proportional to the intensity of the field and inversely proportional to the frequency of the field, included in omega here. And this is a very reasonable result, because we all know that apart from intensity windows, apart from the window effects, we have the effects increase with intensity. And we all know also that the low frequency fields are the most bioactive, and this is explained by this theory. Also, because of this constant factor in the solution of the equation, which doubles the amplitude at 0 time, which means with every repeating pulse, with every new pulse coming, the amplitude is not just this, but is twice as much as this because of this constant parameter. And this explains very well the higher bioactivity of the pulsing fields in relation to the continuous wave fields.
Yes. Dimitri, can I ask you to begin to wrap up the talk, please?
Yes, I will. If we draw the solution of the equation, we get this line, and the bioactive combinations of intensity and frequency are above this line. And we can see that the bioactive region predicted by the theory includes all the combinations of the wireless communication EMFs, which is the 217 hertz of 2G pulsations, the 100 hertz pulsations included in 3, 4, and 5G and the DECT, the 10 hertz pulsations from Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and the continuous wave 50 hertz power line, 50, 60 hertz power line EMFs. They are all included in the bioactive region predicted by the theory. And concluding this presentation with suggestions, with protective suggestions, avoid any unnecessary exposure to man-made EMFs, avoid living close to any antennas or high voltage power lines. Regarding mobile phone use, make use of the loudspeaker or air tube headsets. Keep the handset at least 40 to 50 centimeters away from the body. Minimize number and duration of calls. Do not carry the device in your hands or in your body while it is turned on. Put it in airplane mode. Keep it at the greatest possible distance, at least several meters, at home and work, and turn it off during sleep. Use wire connections for domestic phones and internet. Disable Wi-Fi and Bluetooth from cars and devices. In every new device, there are Wi-Fi and Bluetooth fields. For example, in printers, all new printers, they have activated Wi-Fi's and Bluetooths when you buy them. And it is already activated, and you have to go to the menu and find and deactivate these functions. Educate parents and pregnant women not to expose embryos and kids. Possible correlation with autism and autoimmune diseases need to be carefully investigated. Avoid permanent and complete shielding, as this causes internal desynchronization. This is a well-known medical syndrome that increases cancer risk. And there is, of course, an urgent need for drastic reconsideration of the current exposure limits, especially for ELF and RF, and activation of the precautionary principle and the ALARA as low as reasonably achieved principle. Thank you very much.